All right, so engaging students in the online classroom, and I'm Whitney Boswell. I am the new instructional designer here at Green River, and I have about 7 years of experience in instructional design, from a bit in the business world to State College, Trinity University, to a private university. And I also actually taught high school for a year, so I have a little bit of in-person experience. So I'm excited to be here and share what I have to offer. So I'd like to have you guys introduce yourselves to each other. So your name, the course you're teaching online, and then if your course were a type of play, which type of play would it be and why? And if you really want to get detailed, like the English group this morning did, you could give me a specific play that your course is. So Fred, I'm just going to go down the list and
Oh, great.
That's a tragedy right there.
I know, right? So my name is Fred Creek, and a little known fact, I used to be the director of security at Green River. I was there for 17 years, actually.
Wow.
And
I remember that.
I left in 2013, but I stayed on as an adjunct faculty teaching in the criminal justice program. I teach Criminal Justice 101, and this next quarter I'm teaching a community policing class, which is new to me teaching, not new to my course management. But and then I'll be teaching a corrections class in the spring. I think it's between a comedy, a tragedy, and historical, as the criminal justice field is sometimes. So and sometimes even a musical. But I think it'd be historical, where we try to teach the foundations of criminal justice in the workforce and how they relate to a community.
Thank you. Krish?
Yeah, Krish Mahadevan. I'm from the IT department. I've been teaching online classes a little bit, but most of my experience has been face-to-face. The courses that I teach predominantly is in the cybersecurity area. So this quarter, I'm teaching 3 classes on the cloud computing platform and one of Windows Server class, how to configure in Active Directory users and blah, 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 everything else. I guess with cybersecurity is definitely tragedy. It's not historical, it's hysterical, if anything, more than, and it's music to the hackers' ears, I guess. So mix up all of that, but yeah. It's definitely not comedy anymore.
Well, thank you. Kelsey?
Hi. So my name's Kelsey Denton. I teach communication studies courses, and those are public speaking, interpersonal communication, small group, intercultural. We do a communication and professions course, which is interviewing and cover letters and that kind of thing. And believe it or not, what we teach most frequently online is actually interpersonal communication. Because it's a theory course. So you're learning the theories, and even if I'm teaching it face to face, I can't follow someone home and watch what they're doing, right? So I think that course is actually really a bit of a musical, because the students come in often thinking they know everything about it. Like, why do I need to take interpersonal communication? And if the course is successful, they leave with a brand new knowledge base and at least vocabulary for engaging in their relationships in a more meaningful and intentional way. Maybe cool. Like the Music Man or something, right?
Yeah, specific.
So, yeah.
Love it. All right, Marianne.
Hi, my name's Marianne Ludden. I teach the transfer accounting classes, principles 1, 2, and 3 right now. I would actually like to say that my class is historical because, like accounting is the language of business. We've been using it for thousands of years. But I think my students would categorize it as a tragedy.
So at the start of online learning in the early 2000s, Randy Garrison and Terry Anderson built.
They built kind of this community of inquiry about what online learning is all about, and they've kind of honed it over the years and they've added to it. But I'm going to give you kind of like the basics of it. So there's social presence. So this, for students and for you as a faculty, is engaging with each other, bringing your personality and your experiences into class and building those interpersonal relationships while you're in class. Second is your teaching presence. That's the facilitation of the course. So interacting with students in activities, sending announcements, contacting them, emailing them, being an active member of the class. And then cognitive presence. So cognitive presence is that the content's there, the students have time and designed in there to interact with the content itself and have that sustained reflection and discourse on the content. So we take these 3 circles and we merge them together into a Venn diagram, and each of the overlapping areas is its own piece of the learning environment. So the first in teaching and social is setting the climate. So as the instructor, you're using both your social presence and your teaching presence to set the climate, making sure it's safe, making sure students understand what they should be doing. And then your social and cognitive overlap is supporting that discourse. So taking the content and also the social aspect of it and helping students think about things and engage with the content and with each other. The overlap of cognitive and teaching presence is that regulating the learning. So you're taking the content and you're also taking your teaching and your experience as an instructor, and you're giving them feedback. You're redirecting them when they're off course, that sort of thing. And then right there in the middle is where the sweet spot is, that student sitting in the middle and enjoying all 3 aspects of this to have their educational environment. So talking about engagement. So if you can't tell, 3 circles, 3 types of engagement. So student to content engagement, that is kind of your readings, your videos, your video quizzes, annotating documents, reading journal articles, that sort of thing. That's having students engage with the content. Student to student engagement, this is, discussion board activities, group work assignments, study group. If you bring in like social media like Twitter for your class, or VoiceThread, Flipgrid, Panopto even has discussions that you can have on a video, so that social aspect of student-to-student interaction. And then student to instructor, so this is that more teaching presence, so sending out announcements, giving quality feedback, directing and redirecting students in that student-to-student interaction if they're off base in those interactions with the content. And then, calling students, emailing students if they're falling behind, if they're doing really well, kind of giving them kudos. So that's the different types of engagement. All right, so got some background covered. So next is you have a course. And the first thing you want to do is you want to set the stage. So you want to design and set up the course before you even start running it. So you want to make sure the content's there, the environment's set up, you have your plan for communication, you have your activities and your assessments. But it's only 45 minutes, so we're going to micro-focus today on the design and setup of just one activity. And I'm going to particularly just be looking at using the discussion board tool. So you want to make sure that your activities have clear instructions, a structured framework, and they align to larger assignments or course outcomes. So if you think about you as a faculty member teaching a course for the first time, I don't know about you, but the first time you do anything and you don't really know how to do it, you're not really sure what you're doing. So it's the same with students. If they come into an online classroom, even if they've been in online classes before, without clear instructions, they're kind of lost. And it's a little bit worse online because they don't have you at the front of the class to be like, hey teacher, no idea what you're doing and what I'm supposed to be doing. So it's imperative in the online environment to have clear instructions. And in addition to that, the structured framework. Can anybody tell me what the typical online discussion board looks like?
An open-ended question, and then you would have students respond to it and students to respond to somebody else's post, either add to that discussion or a different perspective to whatever's and things like that.
Yeah.
And the instructor can always jump in at any time and direct the whole conversation. That's what I perceive as a discussion.
Yeah. And what are those responses typically like?
I like your idea.
Yeah.
I agree.
I specifically tell them there's no cheering. I'm the cheerleader in this group.
Exactly. Okay.
You cannot.
That's what the clear. Yeah. I second Fred on that. The clear instructions part. That's what I put that in there.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Good job.
Oh, I like that.
I can. Yeah.
I get a
Exactly.
lot of summaries too, where the
Mm.
student posts a summary of whatever they've been asked to engage with, rather than, contributing a unique idea or a question. And again, I have directions about this. I still get students who are summarizing the content that they've been asked to respond to.
Yeah.
Yes. Most students, I feel like, get summary, but they don't get analysis. They don't get that higher level thinking of how to actually engage with it and go a little further than just like, this is what I read. So giving them that framework is really helpful. And we're going to go over some examples. And then aligning to larger assignments, the worst thing for students is just to have something, and it's just busy work. And they don't like it, and you don't like it, and it really shouldn't be there. So having a purpose, having a goal, and it's aligning to you're practicing something to be able to do an assessment that you have later on. So instead of that call and response, as I like to call it in discussion boards, here's some other things you can do. You can have students moderate the discussion. So maybe rotate them in and out each week. So they're in charge of making sure there's a discussion going on. You can have mind maps, where they, are drawing something out on paper or on some sort of software like Paint, and they're creating something to go with your topic, and then they take a picture of it or a screenshot of it, and they actually post that in the discussion board. So it makes it something more creative that they're actually thinking about and doing. You could have debates where everyone has maybe a topic that they are for or against. You can also group that with small group discussions. So in Canvas, you can actually create group sets. So every week you could actually have the same discussion board activity, but each group would be doing it within their group. So they wouldn't be seeing 40 different posts, they would be seeing 3 other posts from their peers. So it makes it less overwhelming, and also kind of gets a little bit more, they can actually think for themselves instead of looking at everyone else's, and kind of breeds a little bit more creativity.
Whitney?
Yeah.
Can I ask a question? Do you ever make it so they can't read anybody else's posts until after they've made their own? And is that a good idea, or?
Yes, I have. I've seen that actually quite a lot. One thing to think about when you do it is making sure in your instructions it says, if you post nothing, just to see everyone else's posts, you get a 0 or some sort of thing. Because I've seen where that's turned on, and they'll just post like a period or a word just so they can see everyone else's post, and then they'll go back and edit it or add another one.
Okay.
But it is a good tool to use when the topic or what you're doing lends itself better to have them be thinking freely without any influence from other peers and what they're putting down.
So if I can add something on that, what I do is I set the due date on the initial post, that they have to do the initial post like on a Wednesday, and it has to be due Wednesday, and then their response to their classmates is not due until Friday. But that initial due date tells me when they're late or not. So if they put that dot in there and then come back and change it afterwards, because students wait till last minute, as we all know, and so that kind of prevents that by having that due date earlier for the initial discussion as opposed to the response to the classmates. Just sharing my thoughts.
Yeah, that's a great way to go around it.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. And let's get into some examples. This is a type of way to use the discussion board. So everybody reads a specific article, and then a group 1 will take a passage from that article and post it. And that's due, like, I think that was Fred who said, due on a very specific day. And then group 2, also due on a different day, they will evaluate 2 of their peers' passages and evaluate why they think they're important, to the content of the course or what they're talking about right there. One thing I want to point you to is the COIL initiative on campus. They use a very specific way to respond to discussion board posts, and it's 5 pieces. So the first is to thank them. Thank you for posting, clarify or summarize what they posted. So if there's something that's unclear to you, ask questions to clarify it. And if everything's clear, then just, summarize. So it's the typical when you're actually active listening, repeat back to someone saying, so I think you're saying this, and then adding a personal reaction, providing more information or research. This is really great. I actually went out and found this article that has an opposing view, and then ending with a question. So maybe if it's an opposing view, you're saying, well, how do you take into consideration this opposing view and whatnot? So this is that structure giving to the students in their replies. So instead of just saying, respond to your peers in a constructive, meaningful way, giving them a very specific way to respond is really helpful for students to be like, okay, I can do that. Calling out specifically that over the next several days, you are in charge of responding to your initial post and anyone who's had questions to you. All right, so icebreakers, community building. We did this at the beginning of our session. So this is really, really important for building that community, building that trust and that safety in an online course. Like in a live class, if you just come in and you have them write some paper and then you have them give those papers to each other and have them critique them, they're not going to feel very comfortable. So being able to, break the ice, get to know each other a little bit, build that community really helps. So this is an example of that. So this one's for an English class. So they go out and they find an image that represents their feelings about their writing skills. I've seen this one in practice, and it's amazing the difference and the variety of images that students come up with. So it gets them a little bit creative, but then they also have to describe why this image represents them. They're getting out of their shells a little bit, they're giving some personal details, but then they get to share with each other and learn about each other. And then the second part of it is that respond to them. So thank them for their post, asking for clarification. So you may or may not want to use this on an icebreaker, but it may be a good way to introduce how to respond to a discussion board post, kind of get them to practice it. So maybe have them do 2 out of 5 or 3 out of 5 of the items. And then, you're responsible for being present throughout the week, not just on the days that are due. So being, again, very explicit in your instructions.
How does that work for everybody? Being present throughout the week, not just on the days that items are due.
Yeah, that's difficult to motivate the student to do. I have started grading. Part of the grade for discussion boards is the timestamp of their post. So I think I say that they have to have 2 replies that are at least 12 hours apart. And not they've got their originating post and then 2 replies that have to be 12 hours apart. And it works a little bit better, but they still find really rote ways to, sometimes they'll do a reply, then do their originating post and just come back once, so they figured out ways around it. But I wonder, if maybe you did the smaller, because I've never broken them down into smaller groups for online discussions. I wonder if maybe you do that if the sense of ownership goes up. So that might help.
That would be really interesting. All right, this is a math example. So this is applying the content. So taking it and rather than discussing something, you're actually creating something. So the first is finding a recipe or creating your own recipe and throwing it up, and it has to have mixed fractions. And then you choose 2 recipes from your peers and you actually triple or double, or you could half those recipes. And so you're using your math skills, but you're actually creating something, and it's actually kind of useful. It's something you actually might do in the kitchen. Here's another math one. So this is decimals. So this gives a really good example of giving a model of what they're kind of they're going to be doing, and then giving them instructions explicit. So this is about the lottery. They find the probability that the instructor will win the lottery, and then they create their own scenario of a probability that has to do with their life, and then explicit instructions on what they're responsible for. And then they solve the probability scenarios of their peers in their responses. So here's a fun one. This is also from English, a scavenger hunt type thing. So they go out and find an image.
Punctuation saves lives.
I
like that.
So let's eat, Grandma, or let's eat. grandma. So you give an example of what they should be looking for, and then they go out and they look for something where either the grammar or the punctuation changes the meaning of it. So there's actually some really funny ones out there. So they go out and find one, and they post it, and then in the interaction piece between them, they're actually responding to one that they've struggled with doing. So like there, and there. This one, I hate this one. And then they post their story about it. So everybody kind of has a story about using it wrong, and then maybe how they have a strategy for dealing with it. MapQuest, so this is where you'd give them a website and hopefully like a Word document or some sort of guide with questions that they would take with them and go explore the website. And then they would come back and kind of take all of those things and write something up about it. And questions on discussion boards are so much better when they are open-ended and there's not necessarily one right answer, so that they can actually think and be creating something. And then the response, again, is the COIL 5 aspect answer. And then part 3, specifically saying that you need to be present and respond to your posts. And all right, scenario. So this one is actually a cybersecurity question or a scenario. So an employee within your organization used the company's digital camera for business purposes. In the course of doing so, they took a scenic photograph that they then loaded onto their personal computer by inserting the SD card. The SD card was infected with malware while connected to the employee's personal computer. When reinserted to a company machine, it infected the organization system with the same malware. So the student needs to create a plan to address the issue, and then you give them specific things that they need to do. So you need to include how do you notify people, how do you identify it, what's your response process, what are your recommendations to management, and what are your prevention strategies. And then in your response for your peers is you are evaluating their plan and how well they did. So this is, how clear was it? How accurate was it? What was the issue? Did they provide recommendations, and so on? And this is really helpful to do after you've had some sort of example. Maybe it's in the readings, maybe it's in like a lecture video or something where they understand how to do a plan and also what a good plan looks like, so they can actually evaluate one. All right. So what can you do? Hopefully this has gotten you some ideas, and I'm going to paste this in the chat so you don't have to type it in. So what would you do? Think about the different ways you could use a discussion board tool, and I'd like you to go to this tiny URL, and it's actually a Google document, and everyone should be able to edit it, and you can just choose your own section with the questions, and you can write down your purpose and your goal, brainstorm on some activities if you feel like you don't already have a specific one you're thinking about, and then write out the instruction for that activity for your class. And I'll give you about 5 to 7 minutes. And if you don't have any idea, go ahead and ask me questions and what you're thinking about, and I'll help you through it.
I'm just trying to think of a good thing I could use a discussion board for in my accounting classes. I don't currently teach any online classes, but I do have hybrids.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wanted to try to put some of these things into the hybrid classes to make the students realize more that this really does require you to do things outside of the classroom. They sometimes think hybrid just means I don't have to go to class as much.
They totally think that. So are there activities you do in class that are really successful?
Well, I do have them work through particular exercises with partners in the classroom, and or sometimes like in class yesterday they worked through an exercise and their teammate worked through the exercise, and then they worked a couple of what their team member had to do and shared answers to see if they had done them right and if they were getting the same answers. So those are the kinds of things I have them do in class. It's mainly just exercises.
Okay, well that's something you could do in like the small group discussion board. So you could pair them up where on the week online portion of it is that they do those exercises on their own. They post to their discussion board their answers, and then they're in a groups of 2, and they have that conversation or that evaluation of each other's there.
Oh, okay. Wow. Okay. I would not have thought of that.
So would that be, so like read or complete the, what is it? What did you call it?
Exercise?
Do they come up with, is it like a worksheet, or do they?
Well, it would be a problem that I gave them. Oh, I see. You're down there at the bottom.
Yeah.
I found you. So it would be, like creating, one of them I'm going to be working on tomorrow is to do ratios. So they will be completing ratios for a given company.
Okay, so you would.
And then they would make a determination on which company was doing better.
So there's definitely a right answer?
No.
No? Okay.
No, there really isn't when it comes to this. You can get a good feel for it, but ratios differ depending on the industry. And I mean, you have to look at so many different things. That's why people invest in so many different things, because there's no real right answer.
Okay.
There's a right answer for the answer to the ratio, but there's not a right answer for the evaluation of whether or not it's a good, the right company.
So it would be like, actually probably something like scenario 1 maybe, and they're figuring out the ratio.
Yeah, calculate ratios for 2 companies.
All right, so something like that.
Yeah, and determine which company to invest. Can I get into it too?
Yeah,
which
you should be able to.
To invest $1,000 in, and why you would choose. So something like that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
All right, so that would be what they do individually, right?
Yeah.
And then you're also doing put students in groups of 2 on the discussion board.
Actually, what I would probably do is what I would think I would do is have one person do scenario 1, one person do scenario 2, and then using the results come together and determine as a group which company to invest in. Would that be?
Yes, that'd be great.
Okay.
Let's do part 2. Something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
okay.
There's a good start.
Okay, cool.
And then
Thank
you just kind of add some details, add some more specific instructions for how they do part 2. But yeah.
All right. I like this.
Excellent. All right. Does anyone else want to share what they came up with? And I'll find you on the screen.
I'm okay with sharing.
All right. Where are you?
I'm the second one from the top.
Okay. Perfect. Go ahead.
So this is kind of a subject that I actually have them do on a weekly basis, is find an article that deals with our reading, but I've never had them respond to it. But I think by using your scavenger hunt idea, I think this would be a great idea to do, is to find an article that relates to our current subjects like courts, and write a short essay on how that article applies, and then respond to classmates discussing areas they feel are as important that their article may not have covered, or that counters their view of the subject.
Okay. So the scavenger hunt is to find the article.
Correct.
Yep. And then
also to find another article that relates to the same subject one their classmates has. I don't know if that's too much, but.
No, not at all. So you're looking at more like part 1.
Right. Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Part 2. Okay. So you may want to think about expanding the part 2 to saying something about do some read your peers' posts and choose 1 or 2 to do some more additional research on, and find a topic that is either not as covered as well or counters the subject. So just giving them that a little bit additional instruction, but I like it.
Would this be better as a group work, like you're saying, split them up into groups on things like this? That way they could cover more. I don't know, maybe amongst themselves, they'd split it up amongst themselves to say, okay, you find what's positive for the what we feel is, I don't know.
Yeah, you could do that in groups. You could also do it so if someone's already responded to something with a first one, you have to find a countering one to it. Or if someone's already responded with a countering one, you have to find the other one.
Okay.
So that each post has both of them. That could be an option. And you could also do it in groups.
Well, the great thing about my subject, there's always counter arguments against everything. So.
It's true. You could do debates.
I know.
So we're going to move back in because we are done. So we set up the play and now we're going to direct it. So that overall thing, once you've set up your course, is you're facilitating the course. So that's your announcements, you're maintaining your communication and environment, you're assessing, you're engaging. And you can check that out when I send you it. It's great. Just like students need a specific schedule to be doing their online courses, so do faculty. And then directing the play specifically in your facilitating the activity. So putting them in groups, informing them how it's going to work, reminding them of deadlines. How many times in an in-person class do you need to remind students that some things due? Same online, they still need those reminders. And then participating, modeling the behavior. So I actually had someone in criminal justice earlier today, and she was asking how she can engage with the students in the discussion board without just being the cheerleader or giving them the right answer. And my suggestion is to question, like learn the art of questioning and get them to think about what they're doing and why they're doing it. So one of the issues with online discussions, as they usually are, is that students get frustrated and there's nothing to respond to. There's nothing really to think about. So being able to draw students out and be like, well, what about this? And have you thought about this specifically? And how does this change things? Can really help students actually be like, oh, I have something to respond to, and it's actually interesting.
Right. So the challenge I have is that's 37 times.
Oh, with students?
Yeah, I have 37 students in my class usually, and it's like.
Don't respond to everyone. Also, don't not be there. So it's a play, right, between, you know, being on everybody's posts and not being there at all. So you want to do, and one of the ways to kind of navigate that is to, if you think about post on someone's, like a group of students one week, kind of throughout, and then the next week do a different group of students' responses. And then you can also do like an announcement at the end of the activity to kind of wrap it up and be like, so-and-so had a great point about this, and this is how we all came together about this, and calling students out. And that way you can cover students that you didn't respond to in the discussion board in that overall announcement. So they know that you're reading them. You're just not necessarily responding to all of them.
So what's a good mixture on that? If I have a class of 30, let's say 35, like 10 a week, 15 a week, 20 a week?
I think 10 a week would be fine, as long as they know you're there and you're.
See, it's these type of guidance that aren't there for the classes. So I'm glad you have this course for us.
Yeah, and if you want, which I am doing now, I'm doing an online mentoring group, and I'm putting it in the chat now. You can sign up. It's going to be very informal, but we're going to meet in December, probably next week, and go over like how to prep your online course and how to get ready for it. Then we'll meet again in January to go over kind of instructor presence and how to be there and types of things. And then I'll have an online course throughout winter quarter where you can ask questions. You can obviously always email me, but I'll kind of be taking you through like your first time teaching online, even though it may not be your first time teaching online, but kind of giving you those tips and hints. So
okay,
go ahead and sign up if you want. And then if you would please fill out that feedback form, it would be very helpful.